So yesterday, Valve released an update for Artifact, and it included some bug fixes. It included some things that you can do in private lobbies and tournaments, specifically adding the ability for players to get random two-color deck options, and also introduced a speed timer, or a blitz mode if you will, where you only have 10 seconds to make each of your actions, which should prove to be kind of fun. But there were also some balance changes, specifically to item cards, and I think that many of them are very, very good changes. They're going to allow for a wider range of deck building options, specifically your item deck, and I think that a lot of them are going to have a big impact in draft modes as well. Potentially secret shot buys. I don't think that these changes will go unnoticed. I'll put it that way. So I wanted to do a quick video and talk about the item card changes and kind of highlight, what changed and what you should potentially be considering now that we got some spicy updates. So we're going to go right down, not necessarily the order of the cards in cost, but instead down the order from the updates as they listed them. So starting with Blade of Vigil. This now has +4 cleave, where previously it was +2 cleave. Now, this was already an item that I liked to include at times in my limited decks, specifically, the draft format, because in draft, it's very common for you to not have a lot of ways to tackle boards that go wide. Unless you draft some board clears, it can be difficult to clear things out. I really like this change. It makes Blade of the Vigil that much more attractive in draft, and specifically because it's +2 attack and +4 cleave, this is actually a fantastic item to stick on blue heroes in draft now in the limited format, because this will raise their attack to clear the creep in front of them and the creeps on the left and on the right, so it makes them go from heroes that typically can't even clear a single melee creep to potentially clearing 3. So I'm a big fan of this change. I'm really looking forward to putting this new Blade of the Vigil to the test in draft. Next up is Keenefolk Plate. Keenefolk Plate used to be like my go-to item for the worst item in the game because it was pretty bad. Because it was 8 gold for equipped hero, has +1 armor, and equipped hero has +1 armor for each of its attackers. And when you compared it to other items, like chainmail, for example, which also got updated, and we'll cross that bridge in a moment. But when you compared it to things that gave you guaranteed just 2 armor, it was pretty bad. It was pretty garbage. Yes, situationally, this can jump you up to as much as 3 armor, but that situation very rarely arises, and it was not typically worth it for you to run this because of the cost. Now, this has been updated. So equipped heroes attackers now also have -1 armor. This is interesting. I don't think that makes this card any more attractive, if I'm being honest. I'm still not a fan. Unless I just am bleeding gold and it shows up in the secret shop, I'm probably not looking to buy this. But it's nice that they're still trying to address underplayed cards. Alright, other amazing changes. Stonehall Pike is now 5 gold. It used to be 6. The same is said of Stonehall Plate. Now, both of these were already good in my opinion. Not quite good enough to cross the threshold in constructed playability, but I played them a lot in draft, so them getting a cost reduction is very, very welcome. But the other reason, and there's going to be some more items that we'll talk about here in a moment, but the other reason that I like this change is because now there are a number of cards that costs 5 gold that you might put in your item deck. And the beauty of that is that the more items that share a cost that are in your item deck, the less likely your opponent is to know exactly what you bought from your shop in constructed. So I'm not saying you would ever do this, but theoretically, if you had a constructed item deck and you had 1 Demagicking Maul, 1 Daggers, 1 Phase Boots, and then 1 of each of the Stonehall items that all now cost 5 gold, and you go to the item shop, you go to the shopping phase and you spend 5 gold or 10 gold and get 2 items, whatever the case may be, your opponent now has to play around the possibility of it being any one of those items. So anytime you have items that share gold, I think that it is something that adds an interesting dynamic when you're building your item deck, and so I like this change. I'm a big fan. They were items I was already a fan of before. It just makes them even more playable now. Barbed mail also reduced in cost. This used to be 6 gold, now it's 5 gold. I'm still not a huge fan of barbed mail, but it's, you know, not terrible. And phase boots is now 5 gold, where it used to be 6 gold. This is one of my favorite items in the game. I'm a big advocate of it. I love playing decks with Bristleback and Sorla, and so giving phase boots a cost reduction is right up my alley. And speaking of which, Assassin's Veil had its cost reduced from 6 to 4. That's right, 4 gold. It now shares a cost with Revtel Signet Ring. So if you, again, like decks that have Sorla, you like decks that have Bristleback, you now have a reduced cost phase boots, which I'm a huge fan of, and a reduced cost Assassin's Veil. And why does that matter? Well, Bristleback wants to kill opposing heroes to get his passive buff. Sorla does not want to catch arrows. So typically you use phase boots to get her hitting a tower, but I think a lot of people forget that you can also use Assassin's Veil if you catch an unlucky arrow and she's attacking a creep or a hero to the left or to the right of her. You can use the Veil to retarget her toward a tower. That is a function of the Veil. So the fact that this is now very cheap and phase boots has also got a reduced cost, I'm a big fan of. Speaking of other cards that recently had their cost reduced, we have Broadsword. This is now 6. It used to be 7. I think that at 6 it's very attractive, and I am far more likely to run this in draft now. And +4 attack is nothing to sneeze at in an aggressive deck, so I might even test whether or not this is playable in Constructed, because again, that's a reasonable amount of damage. That's 10% of a tower's health, so worth looking at. Keenefolk Musket had its cost reduced by 1. It used to cost 7. It now costs 6 as well. Same thing with Chainmail. Same thing with Furlined Mantle. So all of these used to be 7, have now come down to 6. Again, just nice adjustments around the board. And does this mean that these are going to like creep into Constructed play? Probably not, because Blink Dagger is still amazing, but it will affect draft, and it will certainly affect Secret Shop purchases, so I am a fan. Kind of moving further into the higher cost items, we have things like Red Mist Maul. This used to cost 10, it now costs 9. This is a card that I really want to use in draft. 10 gold is often a bit too much. 9 might still prove to be too much, but 5 Siege is impressive, and it can help close out games. So the fact that this is getting a cost reduction, in my opinion, means that it does need to be looked at. And speaking of other items that had their cost reduced, Ring of Tarrasque, I've heard it pronounced a number of ways. I always say Tarrasque. This had its cost reduced from 12 down to 10. Obliterating Orb from 10 down to 9. I'm a big fan of Orb as a secret shot buy. I'm a big fan of Ring of Tarrasque as a secret shot buy, but the fact that this goes from 12 down to 10 means that I might consider running this in Limited as well. In the draft format, 4 health and 6 regen is a massive amount of survivability, so that is very attractive to me. Cloak of Endless Carnage. This one I'm also pretty excited about. This used to cost 13, it's now 10. You get 8 health and potential card draw. In Limited, this is actually really impressive now. And I mean, it should be, because it's a rare card as well, but this goes from a card that I, even if I drafted it, would probably not put in my item deck to one that I would consider on the top end. Because this is a card that now shares a cost with Hourglass. And don't get me wrong, Hourglass is powerful. It has a very, very good effect. but it's 4 health with that effect. This is double the health, and it can potentially draw you cards. I'm sure that we can find a use for it at some point. It will probably take some testing. And then just kind of rounding things out, Hero's Cape used to cost 15. It's down to 12 for a massive 16 health. Plate Mail used to cost 15. That is down to 12 for a massive 4 armor. And even Claymore goes down from 15 to 14. So not quite down to sharing a cost with the other high-end things, probably because 8 attack is massive. That's 20% of a tower's health. It's a lot of burst, but again, just the fact that they are tweaking the numbers says to me that they want to see more items hitting the board. They want to see more customizability in the item decks, and that they are willing to continue tweaking the numbers. And so I am a fan of this update. I'm excited to get to testing. I think that, again, most of these will be felt far more in draft than constructed, but there are some cards that I will admit I'm very eager to give a test in constructed. Veil at 4 gold is a lot of value. Phase boots I was already running, so getting them even more consistently is very attractive to me. So there are some constructed level things to consider, but yeah, limited draft. Like I said, Blade of the Vigil was already something I was a fan of in draft, and I'm even more of a fan of it now. One last thing I want to mention, perhaps my favorite patch note. We're going to go ahead and just put a screenshot of it right up on the screen. This was in a section titled Unchanged. So in the patch notes, this is something they decided to not change. And it says, still in it for the long haul. And I gotta love the reassuring words from Valve, because I know that, you know, people are worried, right? We're seeing constant updates and reminders about player numbers dropping. We're seeing, you know, a lot of people kind of poking fun at Artifact in the current state of things, and everybody's playing armchair dev, and they think they have all of the answers. Myself included, I've provided them with my own personal feedback, and the fact that they're still releasing updates, the fact that, you know, they're telling us that they're committed. Look, I would like to see a roadmap. I'd like to see some big grandiose gesture from them, but even little love notes at the end of patch notes are good for me. So anyway, that's it for this video. I just kind of wanted to talk about the item changes, because I do think that they will have a pretty big impact in limited in the draft format, and I do think that there are some potentially spicy changes that will impact constructed. I also just love the Stonehall changes. I love that we have a large number of potentially playable items that cost exactly 5 gold, because then that means you get to play the information game. Anytime that you can introduce the capacity to bluff your opponent or do something like that, it's injecting a little bit of decision making, a little bit of skill back into the game, and I'm a fan. So anyway, I'm done. I said I was done earlier, but I'm done now for sure. Thanks for watching, and I hope to catch you in the next video.